All right. Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting of March 15th, 2023. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on WHCA. If you could join us as we start with all meetings for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First item we do have on the agenda tonight is an executive session. I don't think it'll be too long because it's a continuation from the executive session we had last time. So hopefully around 15 minutes, yes, 20 minutes or so. And we 7 minutes? George said 7, all right. So we'll have the executive session and then we'll come back to the agenda. So I would enter, let me read why we're going into the executive session, which is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Roll call vote. Sorry. Fred?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Yes. So, you guys got ahead of me. I'll vote yes. Glenn?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'm not going to ask you to go into executive session, but you'll be part of the discussion. So we're now in executive session.
Doors open.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Welcome back. We are back in session. All right. We'll move right along on the agenda. So the next item is to accept the Unit D contract as presented. So I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Fred.
I would just like to point out and actually compliment the negotiation team because it does have a very creative way of moving the hourly wage for our paras to where it needs to be without taking that big bite all in the first year. So if anybody was going online and looking at it, they can see that none of our other contracts contain something of this nature, that there's a dollar amount, for instance, $1 plus 2% in the first year for instructional paras. By doing that, the goal is, and correct me if I'm wrong, George, at the end of the contract, we will be at an hourly wage that's competitive.
Yes, sir. That would be the goal.
You know, without having to take that big bite and do it all at once.
Yes.
That would probably be unaffordable. So I do commend you guys for out-of-the-box thinking, and thank you. I just want to make sure I stated that because at first glance, this didn't seem the greatest with my head. But
Understood. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the vote. This will just be a normal vote, and Lisa, you're voting too. So all those in favor? All those against? All those abstain? Okay, great. So 10:01.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. All right, we'll now move on to public comments. Anyone here for public comments? Okay, seeing none at the moment, but if anyone has any later, I'm sure we'll welcome you. Next item we have is approval of the meeting minutes. If I looked at it correctly, it's the minutes, so I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of
Motion to table.
so moved.
You want to table it?
Yes, please. Because we just received these this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to read them. I don't know if others did.
I read.
Motion to table.
Do you want to just, so how about we didn't get a second?
So
We didn't get a
my
second.
motion.
Yeah, so is everyone okay if we just put this on the agenda next time?
That's fine.
Fantastic. Okay, we can just do it next time. Simple enough. One less vote we have to take. I'm sure we'll take plenty tonight. All right, next we have the student advisory. Folks, I think I saw them. Oh,
Yes, they're there.
hiding in the back.
I'm not sure if they need the board, but I think so.
Okay.
So we do actually have a slides presentation. If we would be, is there any way for us to get it up there, possibly?
Does anyone have,
Or can we just read off of it?
does anyone have the slides?
Yeah, I have it right here.
Is there a way to connect it, George?
On,
Is it in your drive?
yeah.
Just share it.
Okay, can you email it to John Stanford? This was set up today, so.
Cool.
Yeah, great. Yes.
We could open up the computer lab again.
I can put it on a USB stick. I'm trying to think.
VCR.
Yeah.
SAC student outreach plans.
Already came through. Nice. Wow, that was fast. You guys are good. I wouldn't bet that. I wouldn't bet that.
They've been doing this.
Someone that other slide might come up.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't worried about that. No disrespect. All right, fire away.
All right. Good evening. So tonight we've come to you with a presentation about our findings as the advisory committee over the past couple months. Over the past 3 months, the Student Advisory Committee has traveled to all 5 schools to gather invaluable information from our fellow students about their thoughts, suggestions, and concerns with multiple budget line items for fiscal year 2024. One of the biggest things we talked about with all of the kids was their thoughts on start times, whether they liked theirs, whether they wanted to change it. So when we went to Indian Head, there was a majority support for an earlier start time. When we asked what time they woke up at, the majority of them responded 7 a.m. or earlier, and a lot of them told us that their schedules were becoming increasingly busy and getting off the bus at 3:30 was a bit difficult. Conley Elementary said generally the same thing. They woke up early, they wanted to start a little bit earlier. At Duval, there was more of a unanimous agreement that they needed a different start time. A lot of them told us they woke up at 7 a.m. or even before, and that when they had 2 hours before school, they would just sit and watch TV or play video games. And a lot of them told us that in the wintertime, they would get off the bus as it was dark out, and that the last bus leaves the school at 3:35 p.m. every day.
All right, and then looking at the middle school level, there was a difference as compared to the elementary. At the Hanson Middle School, speaking to the student council from grades 5 to 8, there were very mixed opinions as the majority of the older students in the council would rather a later start time, while the younger students, similar to those in the elementary school, wanted somewhat of an earlier start time. But in Hanson Middle School, it seemed that there wasn't much pushback for a great change either direction. It was just a small change that they were looking for. And then at Whitman Middle School, again, meeting with the students for a cause from grades 6 to 8, a lot of them were looking for a later start time, and the other half of them, about half, were content with the current start time that they had. But similar to Hanson Middle School, they weren't looking for much of a change, just a little bit to start with. And then for the high school portion, we were still collecting some data. We're going to reach out to some of the school clubs and extracurriculars in the school right now that have posted some surveys regarding start times and mental health, and we will have that data hopefully by next meeting, if not the meeting following. But with that, we just want to give some personal anecdotes right now regarding high school start times, as we're both seniors in high school, so we've been experiencing it. And though the years, every year has been a little bit different for us because of COVID and whatnot, we feel that a later start time would greatly benefit the high school. Just speaking to friends and almost everybody I know, the start time is just really difficult for us. Waking up this morning, every morning really at this time, is just draining on my mental health. Especially at nights where I'm here at meetings like this, I'm doing other things. Sometimes I don't even get home until 9 o'clock to start my homework. And then I have to try to get it done as quickly as I can so I can go to bed as quickly as I can and wake up probably about 5:56, depending on how many alarms I sleep through. But it's just that all of it, I would just benefit, and I know that speaking from my peers would also benefit from a later start time. Even if I were to get the same amount of sleep, which is, I know, a big counter argument from many that I've heard, is that students will just go to bed later and then they won't actually get more sleep. Being able to wake up, especially in the winter when there's more sunlight out, it just makes the entire atmosphere of going to school less depressing. on late start days, the entire energy of the school is completely different as it is on regular start times. Regular start times, first couple periods are such a drag. And that is at no fault of the teachers whatsoever. It's just the kids aren't prepared to learn. They're looking out the windows and it's dark outside. There's just no way to focus. But on those later start times, and I know that an 8 o'clock start time is a huge jump, but any type of later start time really does give so much of a better benefit to learning. And honestly, speaking from personal experience, I just feel so much happier overall in the morning being able to have a little bit of sunlight, especially in winter. And then I know that Riley had some points as well, so I don't want to speak for too long.
I'll just add my own personal anecdote real quick. In January and February, I was out of sports for a couple months because of a stress fracture. And one of the first things my doctor talked about with me was, what are your other stressors in your life? How much sleep are you getting? What else is happening that's causing this injury besides sports? And one of the first things she told me was, you have to get more sleep. And I was like, I can't. I get home from extracurriculars, I'm doing homework till 10 p.m., and I have to be up at 5:30 or 6 to get to a 7 o'clock start. And she just didn't know what to say because the start time is so early. Some kids just can't get enough sleep, and that's affecting them physically, emotionally, and at school. I know a lot of kids, it's very difficult for them to focus in first period. My first period class last year, my teacher would always be like, guys, you have to wake up, you have to get going. And people would tell her, oh, if your class was later in the day, I'd be able to focus. So I just wanted to add that.
Another thing that we asked about at all the schools as well was school activities. This regarded activities in school and out of school. Speaking to the elementary school students primarily, a lot of them have specialist classes, which include things like art and music, and they were all in favor of these classes. When we ask them, we always start off with, what do you enjoy about school? And the majority of them, the number 2 answer, number 1 is always friends, but number 2 answer is always most definitely these school activities. It's the music classes, the gym classes, the art classes. The younger kids need this type of activity in their day, and the data that we've been collecting just perfectly represents that. And when we asked them about some of the other programs that were mentioned here, such as a robotics program, it seemed like they were genuinely interested. And I would imagine that their interest would grow if they knew more information about it, knew what hands-on activity they would learn. And looking back on my experience, I would have loved that as a kid. Just having that type of different education that's not just pen on paper, but it's more hands-on, that's really getting them to love school and making them more engaged. Besides in-school activities, we asked them about some after-school programs. It seemed that there weren't many options at any of the schools, and I know that a lot of this could be at part because of coming out of COVID. Things haven't fully gone up to speed with how they were before, which I entirely understand. But as long as there just needs to be some type of continued push for after-school activities, especially at younger levels, to get these kids connected to school and have them with some type of engagement and see school as not just a place where they come for 6 hours a day, talk to some friends, and then learn something new. But the school is so much more than that. It's so much more of a community, and that was lost during COVID. So I feel that after-school activities, even if it's just as simple as something like a gymnasium activity or some type of art club or music club, these are essential for making the school atmosphere back to what it was prior.
We did speak on this a couple of meetings ago, but we just wanted to add a little something else after we'd actually talked to the kids. But overwhelmingly, the kids in the elementary and middle school did support having a foreign language. They were really excited when they talked about it. When we went around and asked the kids, oh, what language would you add? And it was always like multiple different languages. So yeah, they do overwhelmingly support adding foreign language to their schools. And overall, the kids gave us a lot of great ideas and a lot of insight into what's going on in their lives. And I hope you guys can carry that with you as you vote on different budget items tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask him a question?
Yeah, question, absolutely.
When you went to the personal thing, Bob, so I understand absolutely. I own my own business, and the first year I opened at 9, and I was like, no way, we're opening at 10, and it's been 30 years at 10, so I get it. But how much time? I mean, it's limited, Would 15 minutes do it? Do you need at least a half hour or an hour?
Even 20 to 30 minutes.
Right. I think there'd be a psychological thing there, knowing it's later than it was, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, any difference will be beneficial.
Okay, any difference. All right.
And just to add on to that, I feel like any difference right now would show that student voices are heard, would show
Yes.
that the majority is being heard in the school. And just because a difference now, that doesn't mean that it's set in stone. But pushing towards any change is going to benefit everybody overall. So I feel like any change is good change for now.
Good job, guys.
I just want to say thank you both. And I'm sorry, I forget the other girl's name that's usually with you guys. Emma, right? Yeah, it's very impressive. You guys take this very seriously. You're engaging with the student population, and you're bringing their voices here, and that's pretty awesome. So thank you.
Yes, nice work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jeff. Your stuff next.
Great. So I'll start with, I had a conversation with folks from DESE. A couple comments were made last week at the meeting regarding our 5th grade and potentially this being illegal. So I did have a conversation, one with Andy Waugh, our counsel, and he recommended that I speak to DESE as well. Andy found nothing in chapter in law that what we're doing is illegal. So I spoke to Heather Montalto, who's a problems resolution team specialist, and another conversation with Anne Marie Stonek, a senior administrator at DESE. Since the district meets the 900 requirement and the 990 requirement for middle and high, we meet that minimum requirement. And I do want to stress it's the minimum requirement. That's where we're at right now. And Anne actually had a follow-up conversation with me today and said it's up to the school committee. The school committee can dictate whether or not you change schedules within the district. So as far as DESE is concerned, we meet the minimum requirement, so it's not a violation of DESE legalities. We hit that standard. But she did say it would be up to the school committee to make decisions if they felt they needed to make decisions based on the schedules that we have currently. And that's within the school committee purview around policy. So I just wanted to report back that, we're not doing something illegal necessarily. We're not doing anything illegal, but it is up to the school committee purview to change the schedules of the schools. That's what we do. It's like the school calendar. So we do meet the minimum requirement for our students at 900 at the elementaries and 990 at both the middle and senior high schools. So I just wanted to state that.
Okay.
Can I? So you say we meet, so my math says we exceed?
We do. I mean, as long as we meet that 990 and 900, we exceed that.
It's important to note that we're not just hitting 900 and 990. The times that we have, we are exceeding those minutes.
Correct.
Chair.
Yeah.
The issue and the topic that I brought forward wasn't necessarily, can you ask DESE if we're meeting regulations? It was that there is a Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I think the question really needed to be, are we violating a human being's civil rights by not providing the same educational opportunity? We have a policy in this district, policy JB, it's Equal Educational Opportunity, which references the legal Civil Rights Act of 1964. So that was the question that I raised.
Understood. Public comment if we have some. Go ahead.
It's pertaining to this.
If you just give your name.
My name is Rosemary Conley, and I do think that people should look at the 10% of educational time per student spending. If we calculate 10% over the 5 years, it's close to $1.4 million of educational time that Whitman students have not had access to. $1.4 million that they were charged for that they did not have access to. Now, additionally, I think you might want to call the the federal government. These are Title I schools, and there are rules within Title I grants, as you know, that you can't create inequities because of the way the regional agreement is written. it solidifies those children in a school where they don't have access to 3 weeks. It sort of puts them there without risk. Now, these children, we have the largest population of low income. We have the largest population of ESL, which do qualify. So these are pieces of information that may not have been given to DESE, and I don't think they would come back with the same conclusion. We have the largest population of multiracial. So these are things that would qualify for discrimination. Sometimes it's how you ask the question that gets you the correct answer, but I don't think that what you're saying is correct. I did call the federal government today, and they'll be getting back, and they did mention that you could file for this. So I don't think that you asked the right questions. This is a Title I school, and this is, you signed up for something, you signed up for equity to receive that grant. Thank you.
Thanks. Fred?
Seeing that we're talking about something a little bit different, you last week said that you spoke to an attorney at DESE that specifically told you we were committing a civil rights violation. Could we have the name of that attorney and the date and time that you spoke to that person?
Through the chair to Fred? Yeah, sure, I'll answer that. However, I didn't say that that person said we were doing this. When I called DESE, they referred me to attorney George Hale. And
Hale?
when I, Hale.
H-A-L-E?
Yes. And when I explained the situation, his response was, this is a school committee problem. And I said, I'm calling from the school committee. I feel it is a problem, and I'm concerned. And he said, okay. And he flipped through a book, and he said, I can give you this phone number and this email to the Boston office of the Civil Rights Division, and someone could file a lawsuit. So that's exactly what was told.
You specifically
So
said...
just so we're clear. So last meeting, what I heard, and we can go back and listen to the video specifically, but what I heard was there was a concern from DESE that we were doing something illegal. We followed up with DESE, and they said we're not.
Correct.
So if there's subsequent concerns, I'm sure those can be shared. The superintendent, he can look into them, but that was what was said last week. So if it's, we need to call this office or that attorney or that attorney, I mean, certainly that can be done, but I think what you shared with me was the concern was the DESE thought, the concern was, does DESE think we're doing something illegal? You said, as the superintendent, that's something I need to make sure we're doing what's right. They said we were. So that's kind of, I think, where we landed. Again, we can chase this thing in all different directions. Lawsuits can happen all the time for a whole host of reasons. That's just, it's the nature of the American legal system. So if there's a concern, then I would suggest we address it to the superintendent and have him look into it. But otherwise, I can just feel we're going to go off the rails here, and this is going to turn into an inquisition. There was a concern, it was addressed. There's a new concern, let the superintendent know we can go into it. That's what I would suggest, but we'll do whatever the committee wants to do.
What's happened really shouldn't matter. What we're going to do is what should matter, and I think we all follow a solution. Either some way to get the two schools aligned, right? Whether it's knock a half hour off one or add a half to the other. That's the solution, right?
Correct. And that was one of the recommendations.
Just do it.
As a school committee,
cut right to the chase.
You could add, or you could subtract a half hour from
sure. Add or subtract, either one. Then there's no argument.
And again, bring it back to the school committee to set that. But
if it's in the same region, then they should be the same.
Okay. And then certainly, so if we want to have a agenda item on revisiting that, or if you want to make a recommendation, that's something we can put on the agenda going forward.
Let's do it.
Okay. School choice. Again, follow-up, I spoke to Andy, and I'll repeat, I think I spoke to it this last week. School choice law is MGL Chapter 76, Section 12B. It creates a presumption that all school districts are school choice unless they opt out. Therefore, and I proposed, we had a 5-5 tie on a proposal, therefore a tie would mean that WH is a school choice district because the school committee did not take an affirmative vote to opt out. So he made some recommendations around taking a vote Here's an example, a motion. I move that the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District withdraw school choice K-12 for the school year 23-24. That would mean that we need an affirmative vote, a 6-4 vote to withdraw us. If not, then he gave me a couple more suggestions around working through that. But we need a 6-4 vote to opt out.
So basically, we talked about this last meeting, so this is more of like I think a technical vote, like the law requires us to vote to opt out.
Every year.
So we should vote to opt out. I'm not sure it's going to be a different vote than what we had last week, but we probably should vote and then go from there. Does that make sense?
All right, so what we did last week was the opposite.
We voted to opt in.
The opposite.
Right. So if we just, again, I don't think this is not a recommendation.
No, I was an
We already
example.
discussed it. This
an
isn't
example.
how folks should vote. It's a technical requirement. And it seems like one we should probably do every year, which is we should vote every year to opt out. Obviously, if that vote doesn't pass, then we've opted in and we can go from there. Correct. Does that make sense? Yes, Fred.
Or just to clarify, my motion last week was opting in, but controlling
Parameters.
Correct.
how we did it with parameters, so that if it's 5-5 and we don't quote unquote opt out, then it's open to all grade levels.
Which I think, which makes all the sense in the world, Fred. It just seems like the first technical step to start this process should be to vote to opt out. If that vote doesn't pass, then you put the parameters, right? Because again, the law requires us to take a vote every year to opt out. So can I entertain a motion to opt out and we can then?
Yeah, I just had a question. So we're allowed to put parameters on it afterwards?
Absolutely. Right.
But when you, as part of the original motion.
No, first.
No. So,
but if you if you opt out, you're out unless you motion to reconsider.
Yeah.
Well, so hold on. So to clarify, if we motion to opt out, then we're out. There is no parameters. No. Okay. If the motion to opt out fails, we're now in, and now we can talk about what parameters we want to put around being in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But again, the way the law is written, it's just this weird, on an annual basis, the school committee must vote to opt out. So we kind of just need to do that. So I have a motion from Steve to opt out of school choice.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So we did the discussion last meeting pretty voluminously. I think the part, so I just want to make sure everyone understands on what we're voting. I will give public comment here in a second. But so what we're voting is to opt out of school choice. So if you vote in the affirmative, we're out. So if you vote yes, we're out of school choice. If you vote no, then we're in school choice. Does everyone understand?
Yep.
Say that again, sorry.
So if you vote yes,
We're opting
out of school choice.
Okay.
And if you vote no, then we would be in school choice. That's the confusing part. Don?
Sure, my discussion comment would be that I heard a lot of conversation about making sure Whitman-Hanson students have access first to everything in the district that we offer, and I would hope that that same philosophy would carry through for all students, as we just spoke of, equal access, right? So when we talk about their time in a school building, that members keep that in mind.
Yes.
Thank you. First, I want to commend you all. Your school has gotten better in the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years. It's provided programs that people want to come here for, and that's something you should be proud of. But one thing that is happening, particularly in Hanson, that you should be watching is declining enrollment. It's not happening in Whitman this year, and it looks pretty good for Whitman. We're changing a trend, apparently, with the new numbers. But Whitman's increase created something very unique, and I think we should be talking about the decrease in hold harmless and the potential of getting 2 million plus next year in aid, because you have bodies in those seats. I do think that you should consider the long-term effect of preventing people from coming in and how funding works with the new Student Opportunity Act. I think you admitted you didn't understand, or you were a little, you were thrown off by these new calculations. Ms. Byers had calculated this and predicted this when she said, hey, let's get full day K. I think that we should take a broader look at preventing people from coming in, because I think that people coming in could actually offset some of the declining enrollment in Hanson and stabilized, aid to assist with things. There is some, questions we all still have about that, but we did see Ms. Byer's predictions come to fruition, and we're at 600,000, I believe.
If you can keep it on school choice.
Yes, I am. It is related to school choice. Not allowing these children could have a negative financial impact. We should investigate that before you eliminate it. Thank you.
So we did talk about that last meeting, and we did talk about the funding that's associated with a school choice student, which is different than how we count enrollments. So we did talk about that last meeting. Anyone else? Okay. Everyone's clear on what we're voting on? Yes? Okay. All those in favor of opting out of school choice? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and abstaining. So the motion does not pass. Okay, so now we are definitely in school choice. We had a vote last week that said we were in, and we're not in.
Motion.
So, hold on. So before we do that, I think you had a recommendation on what you wanted to put for parameters around school choice. It hopefully is going to be the same, but I just want to make sure we hear from him before you.
So I heard last week, and I'm not looking to open choice K to 8. And really in 11 and 12. So the motion what I put together was move that the Whitman Regional School District withdraw from school choice in grades K to 8 and 11 and 12 while allowing students in any grades who move out of the district to remain as school choice students for the school year 23-24. So you're opting out K to 8, 11 and 12. Of what we had before, because you have to opt out.
We have to opt out. Okay.
And you're allowing 9 and 10 and any resident student that moves out to remain in school.
I would make the motion based upon Jeff's parameters.
But it's not allowing any new kids to come in.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Grades 9 and 10.
That's what we've had.
So can you just
Yes.
phrase it again?
So
Maybe
I will.
in
I don't
layman's
like the
terms.
phrasing.
Yeah, we have to vote, we have to opt out. We can't allow in. Again, this is the legalese of
Okay.
Andy. So he put this together. I move that the Whitman Regional School District withdraw from school choice in grades K to 8 and 11 and 12, which opts in 9
that I
and
get,
10,
but I don't get
while allowing students in any grade, because we've had that
I
parameter,
see.
who move out of district
Okay.
to remain as school choice students
Okay.
for the school year 23-24, because we can only vote it for 1 year.
Okay, so that
One year
would
at a
mean,
time.
any elementary kids.
Correct. Any students in any grade whose parents move out and they choose to stay,
Got it.
stays.
Can we add on to that, my motion, to include any students that are currently
And any students that are current.
in here, okay, a student at Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, under the parameters that you have described. In other words, if a family moves out in 8th grade, we can only vote it in for 1 year.
Once they're in school choice, you can't throw them out even if you vote it down the next year.
Then,
So we don't-
then don't worry about
So we
it.
have a motion.
So this year we excluded no student even though we didn't have choice. Okay?
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Discussion. Chris, and then maybe a question.
Yeah, can you just
Go
help me
all the way around.
understand the rationale of allowing 9 and 10 but not any other grade?
That was my
And what
question.
is the benefit and what are the considerations?
So in grades 9 and 10, the students have a fresh start in coming into school. That's what we've done in the past. And in grades 11 and 12, when we could open it up, I have less control, and I don't want to speak for me. Now Dr. Jones and the teachers have less control of that student in grades 11 and 12 graduating from school. So if a student is very unsuccessful in another school and comes to us in grade 12 with little to no credit,
Get that portion of it. I do.
Okay.
I understand that.
You know.
I'm wondering about the other grades.
so
K through 8.
K through 8, I've never had the space right now. And I haven't, to be honest, haven't looked at grades K to 8 in the space to raise class sizes at the elementary level since we've worked really diligently to lower class sizes. I haven't looked at grades K to 8 to allow choice. You know,
So, my first reaction to hearing it's 9 and 10, that to me facilitates the issue that is most concerning to a lot of us that oppose this. Like if the rationale is, we want to open up our schools because we're bringing in programs and we want kids to come and we want to boost our enrollment, we want to, if it's all that, well then let it be all that. But I don't understand. Let's make it 9 and 10 so some of these things that have been a cause for concern in the past can persist. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
To sort of echo Chris's point, but also to ask some clarifying questions. So I spoke about my concern about students not being part of the community and then coming in and taking those from students who are in the community. And I heard that it doesn't affect class size at the high school, and then we're hearing finances and enrollment. So why not open it up? Let's open it up to 5th grade. So 5th grade is our, hopefully middle school in both towns eventually, and they can be a part of the community to prevent the things that have been happening. It doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth when we're saying it's not going to affect class size, it's not going to affect student opportunity, but we're only going to allow it for these 2 grades. If we want to increase our enrollment, if we want more money, then why not open it up to K to 8? We have full day K now. There might be places where students don't have it. We might get more kids that way. If we're going to do it, open it up. Let them become part of our school community from 1st grade to 12th grade. Like the 11th and 12th, I agree. I get that. That makes total sense. But to shut it out for everybody else, based on the arguments that have been given, doesn't make sense to me.
So we have space. We've never had space in the past. We've never had space in the past in elementary and middle. I would put a cap on that.
Sure.
As far as you could allow, and again, this is a sample motion based on what we've had in the past. You could allow 10 students in each grade level, or 20 in each grade level if we have that. The problem that I have in elementaries is it's one classroom, whereas in high school I can diffuse students. If there's 10 or 20 students, I can diffuse them within the building of 1,000. If it's 7 kids that apply for a 1st grade at Duval and it's unpredicted, because as of June, I might not be able to sustain that.
But could you, if it's 7 students at Duval, could you disseminate
Diffuse
them
it throughout the
3
district.
schools?
Absolutely correct. We could do that. Absolutely.
Don, and then Beth, and then I got something, if one of you doesn't ask.
So I couldn't agree with you more, and I'd like to amend the motion to offer school choice K through 12, because there is a provision in the school choice law. I understand that you can put that cap on.
I can put a cap on.
And you can say, I got 1 seat in 2nd grade, I got 4 seats in 5th grade, I got 7 at 9th grade, I got 10. So we don't have to accept 199 kids if they all want to come here. We have the control as the district, so that's what and I'm thinking full day K exactly. I don't want our classes to be over full, but I believe in, let's not discriminate. Let's do K through 12 and know that there's a cap and understand what that is. Maybe as a committee we talk about class size too, having a policy where we don't want class sizes to grow to, both at high school too. And the kindergarten thing I just want to say, because we still have a small pocket of towns around here that don't have full day kindergarten. One of them borders Hanson, and it's Hanover. So that's an opportunity.
So I kind of understand what you're saying, Dawn. However, I still would cap it at the 10th grade because of the issues of graduation. Because that's difficult if the kids come in, like you said, and they don't have enough credits. How do we get them to graduate? And it might not be possible. So, I mean, to cap it at grade 10, to me, and with you, Jeff, capping.
I can cap each grade level.
Which you have done. You have been doing that. There's always been a cap. You have looked at and said what the cap is. And I would hope that you would look at the class sizes, especially with the elementaries, where we've gotten them so that they're manageable, and looking at what's going on, and maybe in the future too, we need to look at. But I think, like Dawn said, if you have only 1 opening in 2nd grade, then you have a lottery and that person gets it.
Correct, absolutely correct.
And, I have no problem with that. But I wouldn't like the 11th, 12th at all. I wouldn't agree with that.
So I guess I want to ask about, the caps. So how and who determines the caps?
So we look at our class sizes, and I look at right now, we're trying to keep elementary class sizes around 20. And that's where we're at right now. So I would have very limited space within the district around 20. We go between 20 and 23 in the middle. That's where we would look at, and 25 at the high school. And the flexibility around the high school is, again, easier because kids get diffused in multiple sections. It's around the elementaries and the middles that it becomes challenging because in middle school, as a sixth grade, there's 4 teachers and X amount of classes. So I would look at what we have for enrollment right now, and one of the pieces is our high school enrollment is one of the lowest this year in grade 9 that we've ever had. We're estimating around 230 students. We usually get about 270. But I would look back and let the committee know we will be accepting 3 students in grade 1, 5 students here, and I look at my specifically Duval grade K right now, which I was guesstimating around 70, and last year I was at 53. So if the committee chooses to do that, we will be open, and I will declare the numbers prior to us putting out a registration or an application.
So I think that would be super helpful, right? Because if not, then like if the committee votes K through 10, for example, and there's no elementary, then again, it's going to be helpful to understand why. Correct. You didn't get any applications, but class sizes are huge, so as long as that's shared, I think that would help.
And then just reviewing the law itself, and Beth, you said the lottery piece. So if we have 3 spots open in the district for grade 3, we don't determine school, just where those slots are. If I have 4 applications, by law, then I do a bingo ball, and you pull names, and those students get it and choose to come here.
But you would have the latitude to say middle school X, for example, is 19, 19, 17, 20, 20. Hey, I'm going to slot those kids into those spots, regardless of whether that's a Hanson school or Whitman school, to try and keep the class sizes equitable.
Correct.
Glenn and then Fred.
Okay. 2 questions. One, Beth, you said lottery. Is that how it would work?
Yes.
It's just a lottery.
If it exceeds your numbers of slots, it is. It has to be a lottery.
And second is do we have the right to deny? I think I asked this before.
You don't have the right to deny based on discipline or IEP.
Great. That's not good. But,
Except, I mean,
all right, let's just say I'm a hockey player, right?
Yep.
And I know my team's horrible this year, but you guys might get a state championship. So I'm going to go play there because it looks better for college. I can do that?
So depending, yes and no.
All right, my kid's okay, so he's going to get off that team.
So the rule around the MIA is this. So if you're a sub-varsity freshman, sophomore, you apply to another school in school choice and we're accepted. And that's the other reason we necessarily don't look at anything above grade 10.
Okay, that's good.
We're accepted. You have that opportunity to try out for that team.
Yeah.
If you are a varsity player, say in grade 9, and I'm going to take Abington, or I'll take Rockland, and you are the soccer forward. I think that's a position. I don't play soccer. And you wanted to come here, but you were a varsity player. You have to apply to the MIA for a waiver.
Okay.
And you have to. The sending AD has to sign it. The sending principal has to sign it. Receiving has to sign it, and has to be approved by the MIA.
So they try to
or you sit out a year.
Gaming the system.
Yes. Or you sit
That's
out
my
a year.
fear, is that people are going to work. I would work the system.
Yep. So you can't deny for discipline unless it's a chapter or a 37H&a-half violation, drugs, weapons, things like that.
Okay.
You can deny. But if it's simple discipline, you get a lot of detentions because you're late, you cannot deny that. Or for IEP status or 504 status.
Fred, Chris, and then who else?
Is it possible when you're limiting to limit the amount of students based upon an enrollment as opposed to based upon, in other words, you're going to say, as long as it's not a class size of greater than, or less than, I should say, 23, 22, because you want to leave probably a student availability if someone moves into the district.
Right.
And that way the only other problem is the carryover effect. If you get X amount of students in first grade, then in second grade, you'd be more limited.
Well, because again, you vote the next year. It's yearly. So if you accepted 7 students in first grade this year, they roll to second grade. I don't have space in second grade that next year. We're open, but we have 0 slots or 1 slot because 5 kids moved out. So,
Chris?
I just had a question regarding like the process, like the application and acceptance process. Can you kind of talk about that?
So
what that looks like?
Sure, it's a standard Massachusetts application for school.
Form,
It's a
get
form.
online?
They fill it out. Parents fill it out. They have to submit. Off the top of my head, their transcript, their attendance record, things like that. There's a checkbox, and it has to be in by a certain date. After that date, the district doesn't have to accept that. So you learn about the student's academic, IEP, 504, discipline record if such. And then again, if there's a slot open, and I'm just giving it for instance, we open choice April 1st, applications are due whatever we usually decide on June 1st. Anything after that is a non-acceptance unless we have space still and we choose to. Before that, if there are 5 slots in 9th grade open, those 5 students will then get a letter from my office. You've been accepted to school choice, and we notify the sending district if they come. Some students have said they're going to come, and then they don't show. They stay in their district.
So there's no personal contact for people coming into our district. It's all just the paperwork and form. There's no process of trying to understand why they want to come here, what specific programs they might be interested in.
I can't ask that question.
You can't?
No.
That's what the appeal is?
No, I can't ask you. I solicit. I'm not even supposed to interview that person because then you're deciding on who might be able to come, because it's strictly a lottery if you go over that. So we're not even supposed to meet with that I understand.
We're talking about gaming the system. I can understand how you could game the system that way.
You're not supposed to have a conversation with that person.
I just had a request for Jeff, and I don't know if the committee would agree. So you just said the timeline is like April 1st to June 1st?
It depends when the committee votes. We have to we have to vote by June 1st.
So if we vote tonight, and then you said that applications would be in by April 1st. So I guess my ask would be that you share with us, here are the grades, here are the class sizes for next year, here's how many choice spots I'm anticipating for each grade level, so that we can see, because I think that that's important looking at moving forward. If we open it K to 10 this year and we get 5 new students per grade, I don't know how sustainable that would be moving forward, like in the elementary schools, but if, enrollment is down as much as it sounds like maybe it is, but just seeing those numbers, like on paper to say,
So if the committee votes that tonight, I'll have those numbers April 5th.
Okay.
That's a non-issue, really. I'd just be looking at where we're at.
Okay.
Very quick question.
Yeah, very quick. Actually, sorry, I got Steve. Steve was waiting.
I'd like to give Dr. John.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to him.
It's going to be a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm pretty sure.
You okay with hearing from
Yeah,
Chris?
and then my question's real quick. He couldn't answer it, though.
Well, then let him go anyways. Let him go anyways. Go ahead.
No. When you hear it, you'll understand why.
Chris Jones, high school principal. First, I want to commend the committee on this thoughtful discussion. I'm obviously, everybody knows I'm very pro school choice. I think it does a lot for the school and the environment. But I did want to bring up one point. I get the 11 and 12 piece, but what about the issue where if a parent choices one kid and they have 2 kids, one's in 9th grade, one's in 11th grade, is there any piece that lets us make an allowance for that if that 9th grader is selected out of that lottery? Or do the siblings split?
So I'm going to trump you on that a little bit. I would tell that parent that that's not an option for that 11th grader.
Okay, just so I know, I'm just wondering.
I mean, just because of where we sit right now, and that 11th grade piece, they're making a choice in 9th grade, and that's where I sit.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
Who gets to draw the lottery ball?
I'll bring you in that day.
Told you to be quick.
Do you have something, Cindy?
Cindy McGann, WHA, Hanson Middle School. There's a couple of good points brought up by Fred, Hillary, a couple other people. You have to think about the cap that you want, because those school choice kids are going to come in, and I don't have an opinion either way. I'm coming from an educator's point of view, because if you cap, say at 25, and then 5 families move in,
yes,
class size is up to 30. Yep. You have all worked very hard to keep it down to 20, 19, 21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear you, Cindy. I want to really look hard at where we're at.
Okay, so I think we're going to do an amendment, and I think it would just be changing the exclusion to just 11 and 12, right? Do I have
Can
it right?
we check with Jen? Did I even get a second when I did K through 12?
No, with your amendment, we kept discussing, so I don't think we have an amendment on the table.
What's that? Yeah. No. So there was no amendment.
So,
but if we could,
you would like me to?
I don't know. I'm listening to the conversations. Sure.
Yeah. To enter into school choice, okay, for grades K through 10.
Can we just do it, since we already have a motion, and we already have a second?
Okay.
I think if we just amend.
We'll amend it to include
To exclude 11 and 12.
Exclude 11 and 12, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Very simple.
And of course, I can't be
Of course,
easy.
you're going to have it in.
With the K through 8 piece being at class size parameters as per the superintendent's
I think he said he's going to bring the numbers at the next meeting. Right? So
it's the numbers that we determine.
we'll determine the numbers at the next meeting. Okay, so there's the amendment. Second? Anyone? All right, fantastic. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Yes.
So just a point of clarification on my end. So say, for example, superintendent, if there's a sophomore who has already been going to the school district, he's been lived there his whole entire life, say he moves out or the family moves out of district and now they go into their junior year, would they still have the opportunity to remain in district?
Yes.
It's just those who are initially coming in junior,
Yes,
senior year,
absolutely
right?
correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Grade 12, you stay. Grade 11, you stay. Yeah.
Good clarification. Any other clarifications? Everyone's good? All right, all those in favor of the amendment? Unanimous. Okay. So now we have the amended motion. Oh, sorry. All those, sorry, I didn't see you, Chris. All those against? Chris? All right. Fine. So that is on the amended. That is on the amendment. Now we need to vote the amended motion, which would be to exclude 11th and 12th grade from school choice.
Yes.
Everyone's clear on that. So a yes vote moves us forward with what we just talked about. Correct. Yes? Yes? Michelle?
Yes.
I know, we usually like these, whoever wrote this law, I'd like to go have a beer with them. Why they make us vote things backwards. All right, so everyone's clear on what we're voting on?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor? 9. All those against? Okay, abstaining. So 9-1, motion passes. Okay.
Thank you.
And you said you'll bring numbers next week?
Yes, I'll bring numbers on April 5th.
Budget.
Okay, so getting into budget. So just a few things I want to discuss a little bit. And I do want to thank our student advisors for bringing some valid points up today, something we can absolutely look at and potentially discuss tonight. So before I make any recommendations, before we discuss budget, I mentioned sped tuition increases, about the 14% for FY24. This is yet to be determined. Actually, last week, the South Shore Superintendent's Group met with our local legislators to let them know how problematic this was, and for district budgets, and offered the legislators some thoughts on how we remedy this. Rep. Sullivan was there, Senator Brady was there, Rep. Cutler sent an aide, Rep. Cutler was not able to be there, so they took some notes, and they're bringing some of those thoughts back to the House. However, if nothing is done, we will receive tuition bills this summer, and we're obligated to pay them. I didn't include that 14% increase in this budget. Last year, this committee decided to keep a one-year circuit breaker allowance in reserve to either apply to the following fiscal year, which we do, or to utilize this for extenuating costs or circumstances. If these tuitions increase beyond the scope of our approved budget at town meeting this year, FY24, I'm going to access those circuit breaker funds once they are appropriated in October to pay off the debt of this increase. Again, I don't know what this increase can be. I know it's probably, I'm hoping it's not 14%, but I doubt it's going to be the 3% that we allocated within the budget. So we were kind of saying best case, maybe 7. But just letting the committee know, we talked about circuit breaker last year. We have an allowance that we've kept, as this committee discussed, keeping that a 1 year in advance, keeping that as a recoverable in case we have tuitions or an increase in this. If we don't use that circuit breaker money, it will go towards FY25, as John has used circuit breaker this year in FY24. So I just wanted to make sure that the public knew that and the committee knew that was what that's what our plan is for that 14% increase if we so get that. E&D, last meeting, John presented what was certified for our E&D, which was $1.718 million. As we discussed in executive session, and it's public now, that the district will need to access approximately $605,000 of E&D to pay the invoices in excess of our insurance coverage to make us whole as a result of the data breach and computer breach that we had in July of 2022. We are not using or we're not going to the towns to make us whole from that breach. This will leave us in excess of $1.13 million left in E&D for FY24. Just want to make sure that, again, folks know that we do have an E&D allowance, and we, as we discussed in executive session, to recover from the data breach to make us whole. We still have some outstanding debt as far as invoices, and the committee, we discussed, not voted, but we discussed the use of E&D potentially for that. So I think it's important that John did certify that, but there is an actual expenditure of E&D already moving forward before we certify or present the FY24 budget. Also, you've had the opportunity to review the Whitman Town budget. Thank you, Whitman. And I did send you information from Hanson that I received yesterday from Hanson around what they've earmarked for assessments to the district. We've had many conversations since December when the first iteration of the budget was presented, and I know we're going to continue this conversation tonight until a vote is taken regarding the budget number and assessment figure. I have presented as a district a budget that's level service of $60,485,257.69, which is an increase of last year of 3.41%. This sets an operating assessment for Whitman of $18 million, I'm just going to say $18,044,860.95, which is 1.303741.65, or a 7.79% increase of the assessment for Whitman. And for Hanson, an assessment of $14,101,971.89, which is an $856,919.85, or a 6.47 increase of the assessment over last year. So overall, a 3.41 increase of our budget. I also presented a few options, and the students spoke about this just a little while ago, of adding to the operating budget, restoring foreign language in 6th through 8, and an option to add robotics K to 8. Restoring foreign language option 1 is a total cost of $98,400, which would add $60,083.04, or a 0.36 increase for Whitman, and a $38,316.96 cost, or a 0.29% increase to Hanson. I did not include restoring foreign language option 2, which was a $335,000 overall budget increase. I don't think I could actually get the teachers in the current environment to actually teach those classes, so I did not include that as an option today. STEM and robotics is a total cost of $55,000, which would add $33,583, or a 0.2% increase to the budget of Whitman, and $21,417, or a 0.16 increase to Hanson. At minimum, and I know we're going to discuss this, but at minimum, I recommend this committee sets the budget at $60,485,257.69, or a 3.41% increase to our budget. But can seriously consider adding foreign language option 1 and STEM and robotics, for which adds $153,400, and adjust the budget to $60,638,675.69 to put us at an overall increase of 3.67 over last year. I think we've heard from our students. I think we've heard from George and Nikki about how our students are progressing, and I think they need the opportunities as presented, but at minimum, stick with our level service and a 4.1% increase to our budget.
Okay. So probably the easiest thing to do is talk about the overall budget. So committee members, in terms of what you want that to look like, we can either do a motion or we can just have discussion, whatever your flavor.
And everybody's digesting first.
Yep. It's only 60 million, right? It's going to take a while to digest.
Well, I'm talking about the new stuff. I mean, the old stuff.
I just felt like I need the committee to know where we're at, and I think it's important that you've been able to see what the towns have presented us, and I appreciate what the towns have presented us. So what we're asking for as level service is not what the towns have presented us.
Fred?
My fear is the towns just don't have the funds. If you look at the increase to Whitman based on this at 1.3 million, and I can't profess to know Hanson's financial picture as well, but I can see, from the accountant's letter, that at a 3% increase, they still have deficits. Whitman had us penciled in for an increase of 5% to the assessment. This is a good amount over 7%. I just don't know where they come up with the money to pay it. And so one of two things happens: it gets shot down on town hall floor, or they're going to divvy it up and push it on an override. Is the only way to do it, and then it may pass and may come back to us. My feeling is if we're going to go for an override, I'd rather see us go for the gold, so to speak. And I don't know that at this time and stature, being so late in the season, that you really have time to mount the proper campaign for that, or the planning, with the towns.
Chris, and then I got something.
Yeah, I'm just, we have on the agenda, budget discussion, set assessment for the vote. So I came with that in mind, knowing what has been presented. And to have an additional consideration be added at this point, I feel like, oh, hold on a second, let me get my bearings, let me think about this. Because I've had a lot of thought about our budget. So I don't know that I'm really ready to consider this at that point. You know what I mean? It's like, do we have a choice to?
We have to vote a budget tonight.
Tonight, that's what I thought.
Hopefully,
So I feel
not
like
too late tonight, but at some point tonight.
Right. I feel like it puts us in a bind,
Well, I presented the budget with those two options in February, and they've been there. We presented the 3.41% budget along the way, but have been asked by our students to consider that as well. It's something that the committee doesn't have to approve. I'm asking the committee to certify at minimum, the level service budget. And again, I want to thank the town administrators for getting numbers, but we got the numbers last week for your review and the numbers from Hanson yesterday for your review. At that point, I didn't know where but I also have to advocate for what we presented in February as options, which is very similar to what we did last year around full day K.
So I just had a couple numbers I wanted to share, and then I'll get to whoever's next. So a couple things. So one, I went back and looked. So in September of last year, I looked at the 5-year plan we presented way back in September, like school had just started, right? And there was a in that, it was an estimated budget increase of 3.13% for level services, right? So not perfect, it was an estimate, but north of 3%, okay? So that was a Whitman assessment increase of 6.14% and a Hanson assessment increase of 5.71%. I think if we look at all of these presentations we've made since then, the numbers have varied a little bit, but again, I guess I will not accept that there's a surprise when we start talking about some of these numbers, because we've talked about them for over a year. So maybe people aren't listening, maybe they're not paying attention, but they're there. We went through them over and over and over again. So the numbers haven't changed. So if the towns have to think about how to fund these things going forward, again, we've gone through this over and over again. The state is not giving us funding. Maybe it'll change next year. Like maybe it looks like maybe we're going to get some funding next year, but if it doesn't, it is what it is. The other thing I looked at, so I know Whitman had given us this last week, which I thought was very much appreciated. Hanson, I know, has just sent us a couple emails. I have no idea what their budget looks like. I'd love to know what it looks like. I have no idea. Whitman, at least, there's a very nice preliminary budget, and I know it's preliminary. But looking at that, based upon these numbers, and bear with me on the numbers a little bit, but the percentages I think are relevant. So if we look at this document in FY23, Article 2 for Whitman was 43.7 million, of which 17.4 million was for the schools. In FY24, it's 45.5 million, of which 18.3 million is for the schools. If we subtract out the schools from both of those budgets, it would have been 26.3 million in FY23 and 27.2 million in FY24. That is a 3.4% increase for Whitman, excluding the schools. The budget that was proposed in our packets is 3.41%. So I really struggle with, and I get we're talking about assessments versus budgets, but you can't operate a district on an assessment. You have to operate a district on a budget, just like the town does. So to me, I think it's just important to look at those numbers. Certainly they may change. I'm a big proponent of, I don't know what Hanson's numbers are. If Hanson says, hey, the budget's only going up 2%, then I'm not sure I feel really excited about a 3.41% school budget, but I don't know what it is. But at least we have some information from Whitman, and it seems pretty consistent. So just wanted to share those numbers and some math. Hopefully it's right, but that was what I came up with. So I got Steve and then Don.
So, and thank you for that, because that really helps us, and even how we wrap our own heads around it. And you and I being on the budget subcommittee this year, I took on the job of secretary, and the chair of that subcommittee, he's quite tough on me, so I don't want to pretend like I wasn't paying attention at any meetings. But we did have all the discussions, we did have all the criterias, and I guess sometimes when it's written out, it does kind of say to people, well, I'm not sure. I want to just ask, because we made these steps and we made them in successes. Would us in this kind of 11th hour, and I mean the 11th hour of a number of years, because we want to get to that next year, as Ms. Conley cited and a lot of us know, is there anything we can self-fund? And I'm not saying that to jump too soon. I don't want to look at 1.7 million as like it's all available and everything. But is there anything that we can self-fund that goes into this budget that might help out? I agree perfectly with the balance of 3.14 or 3.41, 3.41. And I knew if we were there, it did sound like we were in a good spot. But just to also play sort of on the line there of what else can we just think about, not have to come up with. I broke this budget tonight exactly in these assessments.
Don? And then I got Chris.
Sure. I have a few different questions, so I might need to come back if I leave something out. But I want to first mention thank you to Riley and Noah for your comments. And I appreciate their comments. Kids aren't prepared to learn that early in the morning. They're happier, with the later start. I think we all have talked that in a lot. But this budget doesn't address that. I also appreciated the comments about school and community, because I think that's such an important part of what we do. School and community, they go together. I've advocated this in past years. Just in this, again, isn't in this, but we can do better, like a family and community engagement director, right? Providing those after-school programs, working with Camp Kiwanee and recreation in both towns. That's what we do together. That's how we strengthen this relationship. In this level service and this 3.41% is the real cost of our needs in education. We've talked about that, and Mr. Boyce kind of just mentioned self-funding, but we've done that a lot in the past, and it has sort of skewed what our actual costs are in our budget. So by funding using one-time money in the budget, right now we're not doing that, and this is what the cost is for this. I would like to mention that we haven't talked about the legality of an override either. So when we talk about an override, we are a regional school district, so what our assessment is, it gets sent to town meeting floor. And if both towns, one or the other, should choose to have a municipal override and that should fail, it does not change the assessment. The school is funded because it's a regional school district. It doesn't change it any more than it would change South Shore VOTEC assessment or the Norfolk Aggie assessment. The other data point that doesn't get talked about enough is from the Department of Revenue. It's the municipal revenue growth factor. MRGF, and that's a data point after the towns both certify their budgets. And that's just what it says, municipal revenue growth. It's what each of the towns is projected to grow in revenue. That number right now for this year for Whitman is 4%, 4.0. For Hanson, it's 3.9%. So to me, when I look at our budget, growing at 3.4%, it's below what the towns have actually established with the DOR as their annual growth factor. And last comment right now is if we wanted to save money, I think we could look at busing. There's a non-mandated piece that's being funded by towns, and that's $211,000 by Whitman. So that's a decision we as a committee talked about in the past and could vote to save money that way if we wanted to choose to not provide transportation to those who live closest to their schools. But the last comment is what was mentioned earlier. Again, our Title I school and our students with the highest needs, that I really feel are left at the end of the line, literally. They go to school the latest. It was mentioned in the comments. They come to late. They're home waiting to go to school at 9:15 a.m. at Duval. And the bus doesn't leave the school, the last one, until other kids are home. We can certainly do better. We can do better. It's not in this budget right now, but we have room for improvement.
Did you have something like that?
I was just going to add to, Mr. Boyce brought up the assessment piece, and I did send out to the committee the conversation I had with Jay Sullivan too, and it was around the assessment and making sure, and the question was, can you raise or lower the assessment once it's set today? And I clarified with him, he advised against that, and part of the reason that secondary piece of this budget came about was a conversation with a member of this committee to say make sure that we add things in, because we can't necessarily we can't raise the assessment next month, so to speak. So to make sure that the committee knew full well what was in option 1 or option 2 and what that increase might be to this assessment tonight, because it can't go up, or it's recommended not to go up after today, recommended. But, and we've always followed that. So again, coming from the Assistant Commissioner of Finance at DESE, that recommendation was there. So again, I just want to back up. I didn't mean to spring anything on you. It was presented before, but once we set something tonight, can't go up. If next month, we decide, oh wow, we really could get this, there's that balancing act. So I wanted to make that clear.
Chris?
Could you say again how much we took from E&D to offset the cost?
Approximately $605,000.
Right. So that is, through the chair to Mr. Boyce, in terms of if people are asking if we're self-funding things, I think that's important to know that number.
We did.
Yeah, so while it hasn't been taken out presently, it's anticipated.
Correct.
Which would bring it down to 1.1 already.
Correct.
So
that's correct.
Chris, you're good?
I am, thank you.
Hillary, and then Beth.
I just think it's really important that when people are talking about this budget, that we talk about that it's level serviced. I don't think people outside education really understand what that means. I think that people who are looking at $60 million are like, oh my God, it's $60 million. What else are they getting? It's this increase. Our students are not getting anything more with this budget. And that is so important. We have these working groups, and we're trying, and we all are trying to give the kids more things. And every year we find ourselves back here like, okay, well, we kind of have to pick and choose, and it's level. With Hold Harmless, and hopefully we'll make, be turning that around and getting more funding. But it is a level serviced budget. That's all. And I don't see, it makes me sick to my stomach that the word override is being thrown in here when we are level servicing the students. We're not adding things. We're not adding anything. And we're talking about saving money and cutting buses, and kids are waiting in the dark. I mean, I understand if we have to do it, we have to do it. But like, what are we doing? Like, that's what's going through my mind. A level service budget is the best that we have, and I understand that we know what we know, but that needs to be really explained. The cost of education, we talked about the special ed increases that isn't even in here, right? But the cost of educating children has increased. And that's how it is. And our kids are still living in the post-COVID world. The students need everything we have right now. We saw the wonderful presentation last week about how they're making achievement gains. We just had our policy subcommittee meeting where we talked about how we don't have enough to service all the needs of the students as far as their mental health and their socio-emotional and substances and things like that. There's so much more we could do, and we need to stand, I feel like, we need to stand our ground on this is what we have, because we can't cut. We can't cut anything. We just can't.
Well, you know, I was on the committee before, many years ago, and this is the conversation that always comes up. And the conversation is, what's our job here on the school committee? And our job is, yes, we represent the towns, but our main focus are the students and what we have to do. And it is a level service budget. We're not asking for anything new. We're not even asking the town to help pay for the breach that we had. We're gonna, the insurance, and we're gonna take it out of our own funding to pay for it. This is level service, and as a former teacher in this district, level service is not always the greatest thing, folks. Level service means you don't go anywhere further. You stay the same. So to not vote for a level service and not advocate for the students to keep the service, at least of what they have, is really not doing your job. And I understand that people say, well, you're supposed to represent the towns. Yeah, and we are. We're representing the children and the parents and everybody else who lives here, because the students are our future. And we need to make sure that we take care of those students and do the best we can. And I would love to see more things added. And I would love to see us, as Steve says, use the E&D and do the robotics and the Spanish myself, that's personally, without going any further to the towns. Because next year we're crossing fingers and hoping that we can add it to the budget and it wouldn't be a problem. And I know they're going to revisit some of the extras that we put in from COVID, and I want to put that in quotation because with our numbers that we saw last meeting, that they're working wonders. And I know that they're going to revisit to see, do we need some of those people to stay here? And I would probably guess yes, if the numbers keep going. So I look to the committee to support the budget as presented with the original amount at this time, to at least give them level service and fight for that on our town hall floors, and fight for it with the finance committee coming up. So,
Fred?
I believe that we need to do as much for our students as we can, no question. But at the same time, I look at a $1.3 million increase to the town of Whitman, and to the best of my knowledge, that's about every penny of new revenue that they'll have. So that means they're going to have to lay off policemen, firemen, DPW workers, probably town hall workers, in order to, meet some services, because they're not going to have any money for any raises if they pay that bill. It's like in your own household, or Chris is a banker, you'll get someone's application in for a car or a house. What's the debt to income? Can they afford it? And that's my big fear, is that the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson, they just can't afford this bill. And that's where, my concerns have been, and I'm going to shut up because I've been saying it for months and months now, but that's where my big concerns are. Not that the monies aren't needed, not that we don't need that robotics program, and not that we shouldn't be offering foreign language in the manner that was presented. It's a matter of who's going to write the check to pay the bill, and how does that get done. And I think we represent everybody, when it comes to that.
Anyone else from the committee? Otherwise, I'm going to open up to public comments. Oh, Dean, yes.
Yeah, so I guess the first part I'll talk about is, I know there's been a lot of conversation pertaining to E&D usage, and I'd say tread lightly when thinking about using E&D, because the other aspect that we need to think about in terms of long-term is we have a new building project, and something that was impacted, I believe, in July of 2020 was our bond rating, and our bond rating was lowered in two parts. I'm sure there may have been several more, but the two major aspects was our low E&D amount that we were carrying and our inability or lack of investing into OPEB. And this current budget as presented does not contribute any OPEB investments at that. So again, I guess what I'm getting at is obviously by having a lower bond rate, we would be paying for it in the long term by having a higher interest rate. The other part, I want to talk about, and I want to thank Student Advisory again for that great presentation. They've spent the last couple of months really focusing and zeroing on the cultural aspect of foreign language and the services that we provide. And something that really I hadn't thought about until talking with them was the impact that really the differences in our demographics has had in our community. For example, I believe there's about 50 ELL students over in Duval, and on average, you could say there's about 2 ELL students per classroom. And I think the cultural impact that you have is now you have another student who may not be able to speak the same language as you or is trying to learn that language, and by not understanding or having the ability or access to tools to another foreign language to learn it, what you're doing is impeding upon their ability to communicate and learn with one another and connect to their peers. So I think it's imperative we add these services, and to Noah's point, really show that student voice matters. I think the recommendation that was brought forward over the summer during the workshops by Mr. Farrow and the crew was a great model, a hybrid model. It was financially feasible, and I think from an academic standpoint, it gives them the opportunity to take Spanish 1, and then we'll have them more prepared for when they move on to the high school. And then obviously the STEM and robotics as well. I think, as we all know, is we're a changing society, and I think the younger generations, mine and my successors, are definitely more in tune with STEM and robotics, and I think anything we can do to prepare them for next level learning and career preparation, I think is great. And the other part, I want to add is, as the superintendent has mentioned several times, and we made this vote back in 2021, we as a committee had actually reduced our budget by $775,000, and what we did is we supplanted it with ESSER 2, which we are now using ESSER 3 to fund these positions. So we have long-term positions that we know we're going to need, that George and Nikki did a great job presenting the data and shows that these are something we're going to need long-term, and next year our focus is going to be on funding and retaining these positions. So, the question I pose to the committee is, what is our plan long-term? Because if we don't add services now, if we kick the can once again for level services, what are we doing next year? Are we going to try to just prioritize ESSER 3 and try to put that into the operating budget and that's it? Or are we going to try to hope that the state bails us out again like they did in the late 90s when we didn't invest in education, which has put us in the predicament that we're in now? I mean, we really need to think about the long-term aspect, and I think, there's going to be significant damage done to our student body and done to our ability to be able to adequately fund our district if we don't include some of these services. So I guess that's my question is, what's our long term? Because we had 4 working groups, over the summer, and we had this very ambitious plan to try to add services, and here we are once again in the same spot that we've been in a familiar predicament. I mean, to quote George Farrow, he usually says something along the lines, I've been here since 2004 and this is all I know. And it gets a bit ridiculous because, I've been here for X amount of years and this is all I know. And I think it's time we start adding services and prioritizing it, because I believe Hillary said it last week or maybe the week before. I mean, think about the benefits full day K has had in one single year, whether it's through enrollment or through our culture or our ability to be a competitive district where people now, if you have a young family and you're looking to move somewhere, you go, hey, maybe I will move here because it's free instead of $3,200 per child. I can actually afford it. It's best for my economic situation. So I think these are the things we need to consider. And as where I'm at, I'm in full favor of us adding the foreign language at the middle school and the robotics program into the operating budget. I think to continue to use E&D any more than we already need to would be a bad idea for the reasons I said before, because we do have a huge building project we need to prioritize, and we need to get our bonding rate to a better level than where it's at right now, on level with what the 2 municipalities are. And that's that. So I ask, everyone tonight, whether you vote one way or another, to really consider not just, where we're at this fiscal year, but the long-term impact too, because we hear it every year, either partnership, the municipalities don't have enough, whatever the case may be. But I say, take a look at the data, and as Ms. Byers pointed out, the municipal growth factor, which says 4%. So therefore, they can claim every, an arbitrary number, let's say 5%, for example. It's 5% is the assessment. They can make up an arbitrary number, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's reflective of the data or their ability to pay the district. So, I'll just say that. Thank you.
I'd really like to get...
I want to speak to it, the growth factor being 4%. So if they're setting aside 4% of their growth or 4% of their additional revenues, is I believe how that number is comprised. If they're setting aside 4%, but they pencil us in for 5%, they're penciling us in excess of what the projections are. And I just want to clarify that. It's not that goes against our quote-unquote budget increase. That's what goes against our assessment. So there's still...
Let's open it up to some public, and then hopefully we can get a motion. Yes.
Rosemary Conley, Whitman, Mass. 405 Franklin Street. Just so people understand best practices, and I believe you can speak to the Chapter 70 workbook, is 5% of the total budget. Every law that I've looked at, every standard I've looked at, does not differentiate. And if you look at the math, if you compare to another town, it doesn't really differentiate between regional or not, because it ends up being what your cost would generally be. We get a little bit of a discount from a regional school, but we don't get some fabulous one. We get one superintendent. We get, shared staff in the upper offices. So I think, although there was some real confusion with that Madden number, I do think when we have confusion like that, we can look to the state and other standards and other workbooks to find that real number. In the end, it's going to be a section. Let's not obfuscate math or numbers here. We can throw at everything. You have a section like a pie in a budget, right? That pie grew. Your slice has the potential, if they kept your slice the same, is going to grow by 4%. Although we do have other costs that we'd like to sort of pull from other places. We'd like to have capital, we'd like to have those things, but that's filling in that section of pie. Think of it that way. So you're not firing people unless we're growing in other departments or we're making choices, and that's sort of the conversation. Another important thing that somebody mentioned was that you're separate. You're separate even if you're not a regional school. You're elected separately because there are a lot of laws pertaining to education that must be met. You are caring for our next generation. You are creating our next doctors, our next foundation. That's really important, and society feels that's important. So your choices have to be made to determine what are we making, who are we putting forward, and what sort of foundation do they have to plug into society. So laws and ethics, essentially, are really your biggest realm, and a consideration, a real consideration of never to go above that municipal growth factor, because at that point, it starts to pull. We do have situations in Whitman where we have not handled capital because of the statutory, because statutory was done well. Whitman has had a situation where we have millions of dollars, which I think we ended up using stabilization one year just to fund the school budget right before we did. So we do have that to consider. But as far as your obligation, you do have to consider what you're putting forward. Another important point is you really don't have an override for a fairly level service. You send a bill because you have to meet those laws and those important standards, and you have an important job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
How you doing, guys? Sean Kane, 31 Forest Street. I think if I was framing the budget, I think I would say it this way. we know why this is such a difficult situation. We know why it's been like this for so long. The hold harmless concept, that we're in the hold harmless situation, creates this tragic dilemma. Because we've been in hold harmless for so long, we aren't getting enough state aid to sustain the budget. That's the answer. That's it. We can sum it up right there. That's the tragic situation that we're in. There isn't a simple solution. Even with your level service, after adding a little bit last year, we would really struggle to get that money to fund our other town departments. So do we fight on the town floor for the schools, meaning that you're fighting against other town departments if it's within the levy? Because that's the situation we'd be in. Or do you ask for more and we look for an override? It's a mathematical equation. And it's tragic because there are services that kids need. We need more services, obviously, the situation we're in. So what do we do? You happen to be in the unfortunate situation, hopefully at the tail end of a long 11 or 12-year run where we've been in this unfortunate situation. Hopefully next year the tide starts to turn and you can begin to see more growth budgets, but that is the answer, unfortunately. So for me, I'd ask you to consider the practical implications of going above what some of the towns, what the two towns have sent forth, because mathematically, I'm not quite sure how we would fund it, given the needs of other departments.
Thanks, Sean. Who's going to win? Justin or Kathleen?
Foot race.
Sure, Peter. Justin Evans, 57 Candlewick Lane. I can at least shed some light on the municipal revenue growth factor and what we're looking at for revenue growth this year. So taking the general fund only, because we can't use sewer, water, ratepayer funds on anything outside of the enterprise, we're looking at 4.3% municipal revenue growth factor. This is the projection for this year. That's a little less than $1.7 million of total growth to spend everywhere. So if the level service plus 2 additional programs is 1.4 million to the towns, it was up there earlier, to the town of Whitman, and our
1303. 1,303,741.
It's been moved up. The 153,000 that was up there earlier raised it to about 1.4.
Yep. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was looking at the base number.
Yeah. So if that's in there, the Plymouth County retirement assessment's about $300,000. That's everything. So that's where the town of Whitman's coming out with its 5% that we've projected in there.
Kathleen?
Kathleen Otana, 344 Washington Street, Whitman Finance Committee. I would just urge you to hold fast to the budget suggested by the superintendent. It's early in the budget process. We still have, budgets to be heard at the Finance Committee level, and if you don't ask for it tonight, you cannot ask for it later. So if you cut it now, and then we realize down the road that there is money that we didn't realize, whether it's more growth than we thought we had, or methods of capturing excess levy capacity that eluded us last year, this is not the time to start cutting. This is the time to hold fast, to advocate for the program that the children need, and then down the road, we've always been town and school who worked together to provide what's best for the school and the town. So we're not talking about laying off firefighters at the expense of school children. We're reasonable human beings, and if there's no money, then we'll deal with that then. But this is not the time to think we may not have the money, so let's cut today. So please hold firm to the budget recommended by the superintendent.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing that we've exhausted public comment, can we get a motion and then we'll probably have some more discussion?
Do you have the official sheet, though, that we motioned?
Yes, absolutely. He's got copies for
everybody.
Do you have a copy? Do you want to make a motion?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, grab a copy. It's the first item.
First item.
So number 1.
And I just put the budget amount here.
Just put it is a blank for the dollar amount.
I move to certify the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 2024 budget in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $60,638,675.69, which I believe would be the addition of the 2 programs.
Is there a second? David added the 2 programs, just to be clear. Yep, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Discussion, so that would include the foreign language and the robotics, correct? Okay. Other discussion? Chris?
Yeah, I just want to thank Dave particularly.
There's a lot to read there.
What's that?
There's a lot to read there?
Yeah, that too.
Just kidding.
No, my first reaction to adding to, what we had talked about before, I understand it's not the first time we've seen it, but we were kind of going along that motion or road or avenue or something. And I just think David really captures the need for these programs very, very well. And Ms. Sotina, very articulate and convincing, and that we can't increase it from here. Well, it's a pretty bad idea too, right? So we really should do all we can to support the kids while we have the chance.
John, did you get that motion? Because that might change that will change the assessments. Did you get David's motion?
Yes, $60,638,675.69.
Thank you.
That was the motion. Any other discussions? Don?
I just want to refer back to a document in the packet. I don't know if everyone has this. It was the February 1st packet, document number 23. It gives 10 years of our budget. So it goes back to FY19 to FY28. So while this increase appears large, the FY22 to FY23 increase to the town of Whitman, total assessments, busing, capital, operating, was $400,000. Town of Hanson, last year's, same, $400,000. So that's because we used one-time funds. So I'm not sure what the municipal growth factor was at that time, but it certainly appears that those assessments that we approved last year for a 2.98% budget was a lot less. So I just wanted to bring up those numbers being a lot lower. So I don't know what the towns chose to fund elsewhere if they had additional funds. I'm struggling with this level service budget plus the programs. I appreciate the programs, I do. I'm struggling because it perpetuates the inequity. And without a remedy for that, which was presented by adding 3 buses so we could have the times and actually there's no cost to add the extra half hour to have that earlier. I struggle because if we do nothing to address that, there are 4th graders in Whitman that have a 100% chance next year of receiving 90 hours less, according to the calendar, and 180 hours of school, less access to the building. And that matter should really concern us all. So I feel to do nothing would be shameful. We're one district, and the children have a right to an equal chance to develop their talents throughout. We can't. Who are we to say that a section of the population can't have the same as another section? And is it that we're expecting someone to come to the podium and speak out? Or, if they make a phone call and they're the squeaky wheel, then it will change. Or, they sign a petition, then it will change. What is needed in order to make this change? I don't know how else to say it. I don't. We owe it to them. That's all I have.
John, just a clarifying question. Did you say you anticipate a budget impact for that change, or you do not?
There would be no budget impact, actually, to change the school hours from 6 to 6.5.
Okay, so then why are we having this conversation in budget?
We're having it because it's a committee decision.
We're talking about the budget. So if there's no budgetary impact, why are we having that conversation now?
Are you correcting me or something? I'm offering discussion about this budget. Why I'm offering my discussion as to why I can't even possibly support a level service budget, because what is included in the level service budget is 6 hours for elementary school and 6.5 for middle, which provides an inequity.
But if there isn't
That's
a-
why.
Yeah, no, I get it, but if there isn't a budgetary, so I guess,
I'm saying we could make the change without adding a single dollar to the budget.
so
That's
then
what
why
I'm
are we
saying.
talking about it within the budget?
Because you can lose money.
Sorry, you're not recognized.
I
So we're having a budget conversation, so if there's another issue with changing start times, we can certainly have, again, if we want to put that, or
We
if
said we were going to put
we
it on
can
the
put-
agenda.
Well, we didn't say that. You said that.
Okay, I wanted to.
Right.
I don't know the procedure because I'm new.
So we
Want to.
let's talk about that for the next meeting.
We're going to get that.
If there is budgetary impact, we definitely need to talk about it. So is there budgetary impact or not? Because I can't figure out.
The only budgetary impact would be to align the three schools, aligning the three elementaries. A change of start time would not have an impact, although it would make one school go later than it has now. So there is no budgetary impact if we looked at the school day as presented right now and just added time. It would be no budgetary impact. The budgetary impact would have been to align the three schools to make sure that all three schools got out at the same time prior to 3:45. So those two slides, when I presented the 3:35 Duval end and the 3:45 Duval end, the committee said that's not where we want to go.
So what? In the spirit of trying to resolve this.
Yes.
So what concerns do you have, if any, in changing the time?
If we will have one school, either Conley or Duval, whichever one we so choose, getting out, if we add just a half an hour to the day, just a half an hour to the day, getting out at 3:45.
Perfect. So, but there is no budgetary impact?
No.
Okay.
No.
So, since we're talking about the budget, is everyone okay with, if we add to the agenda, looking at the 30 minutes for fifth grade for Duval and Conley, do I have it right?
No, it's Indian Head too.
Well, it would.
Well, no, the fifth graders are at,
Right.
so it wouldn't be because it's, right? This is,
I think are we okay just?
We need to have a
if we, I guess, look, we're talking about budget.
Yes.
If there's no budgetary impact, then let's talk about the budget.
Correct.
And if
we can
you
talk about
think
that.
there is a way to, I'm probing at this because I want to make sure we say there isn't budgetary impact, then we come back next week and there is budgetary impact and we already voted the budget. That would be a problem. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So letting you know, we could have a.
There's a way to do this without impacting the budget? Correct. And are we okay talking about that next time? Correct.
with only, can I just ask? So I asked for data. So I am not comfortable looking at this. We got achievement data last time.
So hang on. I'm not asking that we're going to vote it next time. I'm
No,
just
I know,
saying we're
but
going to
that would
talk about
help.
it.
If we're talking about it, having data to
Whatever,
have
so
an
what-
informed conversation would be important.
Absolutely. But again, I'm trying to bring us back to budget.
Yep, no, I know.
So anything you want pertaining to this, email this guy right here, and we'll have it for next meeting, and we'll have that conversation. So bringing it back to budget.
And we'll have a recommendation on a solution.
Excellent. So bringing it back to budget. Any other discussion? I'm glad we kind of hashed that out. Maybe we can actually get a resolution. Any other conversation on the budget? Yes.
Rosemary Khan?
You already commented on the budget, did we?
This is, you said, does it have a budgetary impact?
No,
And-
I'm asking if you already did public comment on budget.
I don't-
Or-
Yes.
Or go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Just if you could just.
Just because one of the things I said was you are risking federal funding. So whatever your federal funding is, you're risking. And it's public education at the elementary and secondary
So what does your comment have to do with the budget?
My comment says you are risking, I'm giving you the law and section where you have to abide by the amendment, or because you have entered into agreement. I'm giving you that you are risking, if you create inequity, your federal funding. And whatever that percentage is, and if you'd like me to read it or not, I could send it to you, but it's right here, and it's the consequences.
Right. I just think there are a lot of there are a lot of budgetary risks. Somebody could slip and fall on the way out. There's a lot of things that we could say are budget. I think what we said is we're going to have a conversation.
Move to the vote.
We're going to have a conversation next meeting to hopefully address this item. So if we can do that, that would be wonderful. Okay. We're going to move to the vote. Everyone okay moving to vote? Yes. Okay.
So this includes...
So this is, yes, so this budget figure, Jeff, you got it, is 60, 638, 675, 69? Yes. And it includes the foreign language and the robotics? Okay. Any other discussion? We're good? All right, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? Yes?
Point of order, it does have to be a two-thirds?
Yes, it has to be
Yes,
seven.
it does have
It has
to be a
seven.
two-thirds. Yes, we should all remember those days. Yes, absolutely. All right, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those against? All those abstaining? 8-2. So the motion does carry. By my math, that's more than 2/3.
Yep.
Okay. So is it 8 or 7? Did we get that right?
Yeah, she was looking for my hand.
It was 8. It was 8. 8-2.
8-2. I had 8, and then Don and Fred were against.
Yep.
Yes. All right. Okay. So we have a budget. The next item would be to set the assessments for the town, which is letter F for Hanson and letter G for Whitman.
And that's going to change. From what
John, do you have those?
Yeah, right here.
Okay. If anyone would be so kind as to make a motion using those numbers for the respective towns.
Well, John, that doesn't include, does that include what David just proposed?
I think he's got a live spreadsheet. He's smart. He put it all in a spreadsheet, so.
He's the man.
Yes, sorry. So who wants to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. So it's F. Hanson and G. Whitman? Or
You got it. Yep, exactly.
All right.
And you can see from there.
Yeah, I'll
You've got
try.
good eyes.
Okay. I move to set the fiscal year 2024 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operating assessment for the town of Hanson in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $14,161,705.83. 85 cents.
Pretty good. Thank you.
My eyes are
Is there a
going
second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? All those against? Only vote once. Wait. All those against? All those against?
Delay.
I got yes. All those against?
You against.
Okay. So
it's 7. Beth is in there.
we're still good. Okay, now we're on letter G, if anyone wants to do it, or
All right.
we're going to volunteer David.
Really good. You are. This is good.
Thank you, I got it. I move to set the fiscal year 2024 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District operating assessment for the town of Whitman in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at, bear with me people, $18,138,526. Is there any change? 99 cents?
99 cents.
All right.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Second? Anyone?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor? All those against? Okay.
8-2.
All right.
Correct.
So before we do the next ones, this one wasn't on here, but I think we got to capture it.
Yep.
So this was brought up by Justin last year. Thank you, Justin, for making it 9. So in Section 5 of the regional agreement, there's a section in there about transportation. The second sentence reads, I'll read it for you all. The regional school committee shall determine on an annual basis whether or not non-mandated busing will be paid for by the regional school district. So what we did last year was we voted that to say, no, the regional school district would not be paying for that. The towns are going to pay for that as they have in the past. So it was a technical thing, but that's how we voted it last year. So I would be looking, I'm going to look for a motion to...
Motion to vote not, to send the non-mandated to the towns?
The Whitman-Hanson School Committee will not pay for non-end busing consistent with how we've done it in the past.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Can I get some clarity on the motion? I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
So basically, there was a technical provision in the agreement that basically said we need to vote on an annual basis. If we're going to pay for it, we need to vote if we're not going to pay for it. So if we don't vote this, then theoretically the towns could argue we have to pay for the non-mandated busing out of our district.
The article gets sent over to them.
So this is basically, so they have to pay for it. How they pay for it is up to them, but they have to pay for it. Yes.
All right, got it. Cool.
All right, all those in favor?
Oh, yeah.
Unanimous. Excellent. All right, so now...
The other ones are as is.
We can probably do, it's whatever your pleasure. I guess, David, you're the person. We can either do D and C for non-mandated busing costs or D and E for capital. You choose.
Start with capital.
Capital
They're the
first.
same.
Oh, they're the
Numbers
same,
are the
okay.
same. They don't change.
Capital.
And it's the number italicized, right?
The number
Okay.
that's italicized right there.
All right, so I'll just go from B to E. I move to certify the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 2024 non-mandated transportation assessment for the town of Hanson in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $52,720.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, discussion. So this is something we're working through on the RAC, right? To deal
So
with.
there is a active conversation about how this has been handled and maybe how it should be handled potentially differently going forward. So we're doing it the way we've done it up to this point.
Right.
Okay. Any other? Yep.
But the dollar amounts, essentially, who's making that decision for that 52,000? Just based on how we've done it in the past, which is non-mandated
Yes.
by actual student count.
Yes.
We'll call it the per pupil. So
Yes.
the number of actual non-mandated students. When the other assessed amount that got added into the operating assessment for the transportation piece that's not reimbursed,
Yes.
that piece was split up by the overall district enrollment, 60 and 40. 60 point, where is it? 60.61, 39.39. So I just want it to sort of for the record that that mandated piece of busing that is assessed in the assessments, the actual ridership is 43% Whitman, 57% Hanson. But yet it was split up 60-40 according to district, but yet when we now calculate this piece, we're going to the actual ridership. Whereas the mandated piece, we're not using actual ridership, we're going by the 60-40. So that's using two different methods, essentially is the higher cost assessed to Whitman in both.
Fred?
Well, I'm not an expert. I believe the difference is that the non-mandated is part of regional transportation and it's reimbursed at a rate. So therefore, the district has to apply, and only applies the lump sum, whereas non-mandated is not a requirement to be done. So within the regional agreement, that's what drives how it's split up.
Right. So it would be wise for Whitman to want to advocate for not using the per student method for the non-mandated.
Kathleen, yeah?
I just want to add that it's an ongoing discussion. It's a hot topic at the Regional Agreement Committee. And the way that the non-mandated costs are calculated, it's not per pupil. It's the total number of non-mandated Whitman miles as a percentage of the total non-mandated miles. And that's how it's calculated. It's not students, it's miles.
Okay, thank you.
And the mileage method, FYI, has saved this district, or has earned this district over $1 million in reimbursements, John, over the last, because we've moved from per pupil to per mileage without costing the towns anything and recovering significant state funding just by taking the time to take a look at what are the incentives we can find to be cost effective. So that was a huge improvement in the last 3 fiscal years.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? All those against? Oh, that was unanimous. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. David, you're on a roll, I guess.
We're on C, right?
We're on C.
All right. I move to set the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 2024 non-mandated transportation assessment for the town of Whitman in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $211,563.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Excellent.
All right.
2 more left.
I move to set the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 2024 capital assessment for the town of Hanson in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $274,394.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Okay.
All right. I move to set the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 2024 capital assessment for the town of Whitman in accordance with the pre-K through 12 Whitman-Hanson Regional School District Agreement, Section 4, E2, and MGL Chapter 71, Section 16B at $412,335.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Fred.
And I'm just going off of blank memory, but I thought it was A, higher than that. B, I know the Whitman Capital still has a lot of conversation to have.
Different capital.
Different capital.
This is just a capital assessment, not the capital, like the capital things that need to be funded. This is just the high school.
High school, this is like school buildings.
Oh.
Different ones.
Yes.
No, hey.
I'm sorry.
Did she ask?
Yeah, different capital.
Rather have you asked?
Under the weather.
No? Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Okay. And I think the only other item we had on the agenda was an executive session that you told me we do not need, so it's a wrap. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I have a question?
Oh, yeah. A question.
No, just a question. So do we have 2 Wednesdays again in April, or was one in consideration if it was needed?
We started April, our next meeting is scheduled for April 5th, and that was first to just discuss RAC.
That's it.
Because we haven't had an opportunity to bring back to this committee what has been discussed at RAC. Now we will discuss.
Can we do that on the, can we just leave the 5th as RAC?
Absolutely.
Because that shows us, because we have like,
And then we have our regular meeting on the 12th.
the following
On the 12th.
is the 12th. So we can have a normal, regular.
When's our next meeting, the 5th?
5th, which was the document that Jen sent around, that consensus document, which is basically what came out of RAC. So we need to look at those, talk about those, and
When
kind
you
of
send that around?
We can reset.
It's in your drive.
So that'll be the only thing on the agenda on the 5th, and then we'll have our regular meeting on the 12th. Okay. Perfect.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, folks.
Unanimous. Thank you. Good work.
Executive session.
No
We do not
executive
need to do
session.
an
No, we do
executive
not need. Thank you.